this is like the instrument I spoke of earlier, the kōwauau. So this is a kōwauau made from one of our native rākau, and just in closing, sharing the kaupapa of Rongoa, of healing, sharing the kaupapa of aroha tāne, through our tāne and through our wahine. Just want to express my thanks and gratitude for inviting me onto your show. So just a short little waiata, but nei rā taku mihi aroha ki a kōrua tahi, e te tuahine Jamie, nei rā tō tūnane e mihi kauatu ana ki a koe, e te prata, e te kahi no te tairāwhiti, mai make tū ki Tongariro, mai ngā kuri a whare ki tihi rau, nei rā te mihi aroha o te maunga hukurangi, te awa o waiapu atu kia tātou, tēnā koutou. Mauri ora.
Amen.
It's you too now.
Awesome. Kia ora koutou katoa, e ho mā, nau mai, haere mai, ki te papatakaro, or StayMe Always. Bring it to you organic, live and dynamic. So bring me your cups. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a drink, but I have a cup of almonds, so cheers. That'll do. And let's to the healing well. So we've had multiple series, which I've called Aroha Tāne. And we've based this particular series around 3 totem poles, which I focus on mental well-being, emotional wellness, spiritual awareness. And as we've actually commentated through the various shows, it's also looking at a physical aspect as well. And we're actually privileged today to have Horomona Horo, tohunga and tohunga pūoro. In my eyes, just so for those of you that are overseas, may not understand parts of the Māori language, a tohunga in mind is an expert in a field, and I'm sure Horomona, you would agree. You're laughing. Hey, he told me to say that because I knew your reaction. So I'll take that as a big yes. And what I am going to do though is I'm actually going to get you to explain what taonga pūoro means, because obviously for me, I definitely don't. I know it means a lot to you and others also in that space, and I'd hate to downplay the importance of what it actually means. So do you just want to explain to everybody, to you, what that means so they have an understanding?
Ko te mihi tuatahi, ka tukuna te mihi ki a koe e te tuahine, I tūwhara nei tēnei o ngā kaupapa mō tātou I te rangi nei. Ki a koe e te kahi, I nau I tīmata ai I tō tātou nei kaupapa I tētahi karakia, hei koro wai aroha I a tātou I tēnei wā. O tira ki o koutou katoa e whakarongo ana, e mātakitaki ana tēnei te mihi nui, i ahu mai i ngā maunga whakahihi o Aotearoa ki a koutou katoa. Te toto whenua e ripo atu, e ripo mai ana ki ngā wai ratarata o ngā tūpuna tēnei au ka mihi ake ki a tātou. Nō reira, mauri ora ki a tātou. First and foremost, just really want to thank you, Sis, for inviting me into the space of the Healing Well. And it's a privilege to be invited to kaupapa like this that brings together understandings and brings together like-minded people to speak about certain topics that others hold inside and others feel a bit of anxiety to express out to others. And so with platforms like this, it allows us to understand that it is okay. It is okay to feel the aroha, to feel the love. It is okay to open up, and that is part of the healing journey. In what I said in my language as well was also giving an acknowledgement to my brother, to my kazi, for opening us up with the words to bring the protection of those elements we do not see into the space, to guide us and to let today's session be awesome. And so, yeah, just my practice that I do is taonga puoro, and what taonga puoro are they're the collective of traditional Maori musical instruments, and these are a collection of instruments that were made for trumpet sounds, flute sounds, percussive sounds, a whole range of musical sounds to help the conversation or healing remedies in many scenarios back in the time of our ancestors, right through to today's modern evolving world. We use taonga puoro in music, in healing, and in many other areas of communication of sound frequency, sound vibration, and musical healing. And so once again, it's a pleasure to be here in amongst the kaupapa that you're doing. I've been watching some of your episodes, and it's an awesome job that you're doing, Sis, bringing the balance between our femininity and our masculinity, and letting the world know that it's okay. Jump into this healing well, and be embraced by your own self-healing.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. And but look, you know, I've had, we've been given the privilege to be in your space, to share your experiences, and I know you've had the opportunity to collaborate and perform with some of New Zealand's greatest exports. And just to give everybody a couple of examples, so, you know, Dr. Hirani Melvin and Dr. Richard Nuns, where you've been able to carry on their legacy, and even the likes of Joshua Rogers and our very own Teasy Created.
Yeah, the wonderful thing about music is you continue to build on the inspiration of those exponents that have gone before you. And I was lucky enough to be one of the many that were inspired by the late Dr. Hirani Melvin, who was a great orator, a great songwriter, and of course a wonderful exponent of taonga puoro, of our Māori musical instruments. Him and his mate, the late Dr. Richard Nuns, who was non-Māori, but he was a kaumātua Māori in many eyes. And he found a love of our cultural art form, our cultural healing form of taonga puoro, and shared it to the four corners of our globe, and interwove our taonga puoro with cultures from as far as South and North Korea, all the way down to the people of the many European backgrounds, right through to, you know, up and down the Pacific and the Americas. And so I'm one of a number of taonga puoro practitioners who continue to grow the healing opportunities for people to embrace with our traditional instruments, and interweaving it with awesome musicians as well brings an evolution to the sound. It brings a modern look, and it allows people to understand that the sounds don't have to sit 200 years ago to be relevant today. We can still play the music that comes from those instruments of 1,000 years ago and make it relevant for today's hip hop, for today's orchestral music, for today's jazz, any genre and style of music. If it is music, we can connect to it because we do it on a cultural level, we do it in a humanistic level, and we do it because it shows and gives us the vibration that helps us wake up each morning.
Yeah, and just to carry on from what you're saying, and I want to really hear about your background and where you're from, it's a really great way to introduce culture to our tamariki, especially those that may not have been brought up with the culture. You know, I wasn't brought up with you know, my Māori culture. You know, my grandparents unfortunately didn't speak Māori. They were never allowed. So obviously my parents never passed that on. And the only time I ever went to the marae was because of a tangi. So it was for those reasons why I kind of drew back and didn't really understand the culture. And as I've gotten older, you know, just the music, the waiata, and the instruments, like you're saying, is what's drawn me back. And please, my pronunciation of Māori is not always the best, but hey, I give it a go. I give it a go. But for a lot of tamariki coming through, you know, their identity unfortunately is lost, and they're looking for a way to connect back with their culture, and music is absolutely a winner, and that I have seen coming through with cousins and mokos, etc.
Yeah, you're exactly right there, because, you know, growing up, you know, I'm number 7 of 10 kids on my mother's side, and when I was a baby, I was about 1, my father left, and he had another 7 kids to his first wife that he left to move to Australia to, and then since then he's had other partners and have had more children, and so in and around, I'm doing the count thus far, and one of about 23 when you add them all up. And so, and there are many people around the globe, around the world, that has a similar scenario, you know, that was disconnected from their culture. It's not a new thing here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and it's not a new thing when you're conversing and discussing this very topic with different Indigenous nations around the globe. And so the reconnection to one's language, you know, builds up a stronger identity. And exactly what you're saying, I didn't know much. I thought to be Māori was to have parties every week and to watch your parents fighting, and not having my parents come to any school interviews because, you know, because of bruises and bashings that have happened. And that was a norm. Unfortunately, it was normalized for many Māori, and not just Māori, but many people in lower socioeconomic communities. And so being brought up away from, being disconnected from one's culture, you know, when you do connect with it, it creates a really strong energy. And at first I didn't understand it. And my thing at that time was, I loved hip hop music, I loved reggae music, I loved music that was fighting against the systems of government, you know. And so at that time I loved things like NWA, you know, I loved Wu-Tang Clan, but then also you had the ones that were on the verge, you know, of protesting in movements like Arrested Development, Q-Tip. You had those ones that were both a gangster, but they were still fighting for their people. And then when I started learning about my culture, I started hearing musicians like Shefu, like King Kapisi, you know, hearing the old school ones like Moana and the Tribe, and Moana and the Moor Hunters, and Whirimako Black, and you know, you start hearing all this language in Te Reo Māori that you couldn't understand. You know, I left school at 15 years old. I went to well over 15 different schools, and so I didn't have the greatest upbringing. But one thing that was strong is through the ups and downs that my whānau had, you know, whenever there was something happening in the whānau, all the whānau got together. We were all poor as, but we still got together and managed to pull through. And so there was already some type of strong grounding on what whānau is, but it wasn't in this, what people call te ao Māori viewpoint. It wasn't until I left and ended up in the streets that I really connected with my music, that I really loved hip hop music. I started battling. I loved hip hop, you know. Bone Thugs were the shizzle, and Tupac and Snoop Dogg, you know, they were the shizzle. They were the ones I wanted to be like, just the Māori version.
Yep.
But then, you know, then hearing Shefu and DLT with Chains, you know, and then hearing like Uncle Bob, you know, talking about Exodus and the Zion train is coming our way, and, you know, building up these movements, it introduced me to bands like Damn Native.
Yeah.
And then them saying, behold my cool style while I keep the funk with my Māori, you know, being connected to culture. And I say, hey, I'm Māori. I want to connect to my Māoriness.
Yep.
You know, and so I started finding the connection. But what really happened was when I found my first kōwauau. Now, a kōwauau is a traditional Māori musical flute. And my first kōwauau came out of a hāngi. Now, for those that don't know what a hāngi is, it is a traditional meal of Māori people, that, you know, your food gets cooked in the ground for a few hours before you unravel the dirt and you take away all the sheets that protect the food that is being cooked in the ground. And when you lift it up, all the essence and smoke from the food just goes up into the air, and it just smells so delicious. My first hang, I had a hangi one day, and it had this bone in it, and I just started doing the hikois of tino rangatiratanga. Now, tino rangatiratanga is looking for your self-independence, and this particular flag there, this one right here, is known as the tino rangatiratanga flag. And so when I started going on marches and going to going to different marae, they were teaching me the struggles of te ao Māori, of the Māori people since the assimilation and colonization of the English settlers. And then things started clicking, and I started understanding why I was poor, why my family that talked about things of being so close, but why we were so poor was from the lands that were taken off our people, and the struggles and the many things in New Zealand history that didn't go that well for our people. It gave the reasons, and what I was angry at my parents for, you know, the background of that wasn't actually their fault, you know. And so when I made this first kōwauau, it was actually, I've got an instrument in my ear. So this one here, it's a flute, and this was basically the size of my first kōwauau. And what it done for me is it was able to get through to me from the inside out. Every time I picked my flute up, my kōwauau up, and played it and felt one with it, you know, magical things would happen. I used to smoke weed every single day, you know, because that was the way Snoop Dogg, Tupac and all of them. But as soon as I found myself, as soon as I found what it was to actually be Māori, I was able to just say no to that. I ended up picking up a kōwauau, started playing it, and things started happening around me where at first I thought I was having withdrawals. You know, smoking weed every day of your life, all through your teens, from a very young age, all through your teenage years, can do something to you. And so this was new for me. And, you know, playing one of these instruments and jamming along to an ensemble of birds that were flying away and started talking to you would freak you out.
Wow.
You know. And so when I was doing that, it started allowing me to realize, hey, this is a different energy. This is actually something inside me wanting to come out and let myself know that, hey, be proud to be Māori, because this is who you are. You know. And so playing that one instrument and challenging myself on things, I started teaching myself how to speak Māori, because in getting to all these meetings and these protests, I had to hitchhike. I never had a car. And so I'd hitchhike all around the country with my flute, a bottle of water, you know, and an apple that I would have plucked off somebody's tree. And I'd hitchhike from, you know, the Hokianga in the north all the way down to Wellington.
Wow.
And as long as as long as I acknowledged the environment around me, I could guarantee that I could leave the Hokianga at 8 o'clock in the morning and I will be in Wellington by 8 p.m. that evening, you know. And so I started having these things guide me, and it turned from one instrument to two to three to learning a whole array of taonga pūoro and the stories that are encapsulated in them, as well as, you know, the magic and the healing that's in them. And I know finding yourself or finding one's culture is different for everybody, but I can guarantee you that, you know, if somebody finds something that they love within their culture, it can take you anywhere, because from playing a piece of bone this small, you know, it's only a couple of inches long, what that had done, it had taken the Hori Maori wannabe nigger, and turned him over the years, turned him into someone who stands proud no matter where he is for his culture, and will stand up 100% for his culture. And that's not just my Maori culture. It allowed me to understand that I come from Scotland, that I come from England, that I come from Portugal, and all these other connectors, because without them, I fully wouldn't be here as Horo, you know. And so, I suppose the vessel that has allowed me to express this in the practice that I do today, and that I have done over the last 20 plus years, is music. And Hirani Melbourne and Richard Nuns were wonderful examples for me in my journey. And I know along the journey, I got to meet the right people at the right time. And along the journey, I got to meet an awesome mate who's turned into a brother from another mother. I met him randomly at a wānanga in Rotorua. A wānanga is a workshop that people gather for. And his name was Tama Waipara. And he had a mate who was playing for him on the guitar, and got jamming with him and got to meet him. And he had asked me to, you know, jump on a tour with him, doing teaching children in schools to, you know, get them to read more, you know, and it was called Duffy Books. And, you know, did a tour of that with him, and then, you know, got to meet other awesome athletic people along those journeys, and you know, and one of them's the brother here, you know, and creating those connections and different things. You know, your ancestors guide you on these pathways because they weren't coincidences. It wasn't, you know, a fluke in the phenomena. These things are meant to be, and you know, you create connections that you build for the rest of your life, and those connections hold strong, and that's part of the healing journey. And I've fortunately been able to do that through music, going from the gutters and sleeping underneath bridges and bus stops, through to, you know, traveling all around the world. And the last couple of years staying at home, you know, realizing and grabbing the opportunity for this time to spend with family. And even though all those opportunities of performing all around the world are gone for now, you know, the opportunity to hold strong family values and staying home and holding family strong and letting family know that, it's all part of the healing journey. And yeah, it's been, you know, it's been a challenging journey. You know, nothing that is magical is ever easy. It does take time and it does take work to do, but you enjoy every part of the journey, even the not so good times, because they help you learn and they help you grow. And yeah, and it's led me to this point, and you know, being here with you two and all the listeners that are out there, and just to understand, you know, like you were saying earlier, sis, you are you're learning the language now, and your pronunciation isn't the best. You know, trust me, when I first met the bro, he was quite prolific in the English dictionary and the meanings of very fancy words.
That hasn't changed.
You know, and but what it done, both him and our mate Josh, they actually made myself commit to myself that whenever I would learn or hear somebody say one of those really flash long English words, I reflect on myself and say, well, that's like me. If I speak Māori to them and say a very long Māori word, and they're looking at me just as dumbfounded as I'm looking at them.
Yes.
And so it challenges myself, reflecting it back to myself and saying, well, I need to learn what that word hypothesis means. You know? And using it in a sentence 3 times in a day will help me hold on to that word and understand it. You know, so learning happens all the time.
But don't worry, I've got a walking dictionary, so I'm lucky, actually. You know, I love everything you're saying, your kupu, your expression, you know, your journey. And to go back, you know, we've been talking, and again, we're referencing males, but again, it doesn't really matter, male, female. But we look back at the first 7 years of our life and we talk about identity, and it's been really evidential here. And I think for me, the reason why I've you know, made this decision to move forward to really understand and learn the culture more is that when I was living in Australia, that's where the penny actually dropped. You know, the way the Aborigines were being treated over there, being in their system, having no control. Not saying that we have control here back in New Zealand, but it really, you know, woke me to who I am and the impact that I have as an individual to really understand the culture, to push that, you know, push that forward. I have 2 children, and, you know, they're being brought up in a household not knowing what their culture is, and that didn't sit well with me. So I ended up moving home, and it's been a slow, gradual progression to learn my background and my heritage and where we come from. And it's almost like this whole journey for me has created my purpose, which for you, from what I'm hearing from you, and not putting words in your mouth, but you're very clear in your purpose and why you're here.
Yeah, and the wonderful thing about it, and that was the other thing that I really, what really captured my my eyes when the bro sent me a copy of you know, what you do, is that, you know, it was like a kaupapa tāne, because as we can see, a male kaupapa, as we can see in New Zealand, there are many organisations that are out there that uplift and bring strength to our women, and that is very much needed because of all the you know, the imbalance of many things in our society here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and across the world. But talking about here at home, you know, and from pay parity all the way through to, you know, family violence. You know, our females, our women, our wahine. Whenever I look at it, our mama, you know, our mothers, our daughters, our grandmothers. There's a big imbalance in acknowledgement, because we go back to our first mama, Wainuiatea, who is a female deity beyond the realm of the ozone layer, you know, going out into the celestial platform. We have Wainuiatea. People go back to Papatuanuku, which is beautiful. But even older than Papatuanuku, we have Wainuiatea, and all the deities that are in her realm and capabilities, and a lot of our female atua. That's why I love the kaupapa of Taonga Puoro, because the custodians, the guardians of all of our traditional Māori musical instruments are female deities, a female atua, where in today's society, I can guarantee in majority of the last 20 odd years, whenever people mention different types of karakia Māori, and they start mentioning atua Māori, 90% of the atua that they talk about are all male, and so it's a real masculine overflow of expression, where for our men in our society, we actually are really missing a key component of our femininity, and our tupuna had it. Yes, our tupuna, our warriors of old, they were warriors not only because they expressed the feelings and expressed the actions of tū mata uenga, or of tū mata kōkiri, but they also understood the balance and structure of the emotion behind hine te iwa, of hine rauamoa. And so they knew the balance of being, somebody that can be really muscly and physically fit, but if their emotional side cannot balance, they tend to fall over in society because they cannot express that humanistic emotion that comes along with it. And in a te ao Māori perspective or Māori lens, our ancestors hit the jackpot in terms of the knowledge systems that they taught generation after generation of not only understanding tāne, but understanding wahine. And that every single one of us, in our genes, we have ira atua tāne, ira atua wahine within each and every one of us.
Yes.
And that's the beautiful thing about it is, and whether somebody wants to be a full-on gangster for the Mangu mob, Black Power, or whatever gang they are a part of, you can see the imbalance for some, not all, because I know some mates that are in gangs and they're actually making a big difference with their boys in those gangs, and slowly allowing them to learn about their culture, whether their culture is Māori, whether their culture is Polynesian, whether their culture is from somewhere else. It's understanding cultural value systems, and my practice of taonga puoro, having that balance of to learn a story about this type of instrument here. This instrument here is known as a putorino. When you hear its voice, it has a male voice. That has that trumpet flow to it, that trumpet vibration frequency. It has a female voice, which brings the lament, which brings the emotion. When you have a male energy and a female energy come together, you have your offspring, your uri, your aitanga, your descendants. And so when those two voices come together, you have that third voice in the same instrument, being that of the child. And so you can see in one example of one instrument in our culture, the connection to nature, the connection to genealogy, which for us is whakapapa, and the connection to the beautiful art form that is in the shape of the instrument, the weaving that binds it together, and of course the carving that you see that is intricately carved into the instrument. And each area of those parts of the instrument bring the story, bring the people, and bring the art forms together in the one piece. And our tupuna had that when they wove baskets, when they carved totem poles, or we call pou whakairo, when they painted using the natural colours of the earth, which is kokowai, or the different the different materials that they would create things. And I know every culture in the world has something similar, you know, and so it really brings the wonderful expression that no, it's something as simple as looking in your backyard is the key to your healing remedy.
No, I actually listening to that sound, it immediately just took me into a trance. And in my head, I just had this vision from that male sense of actually being on a waka and actually gliding through the river in the mist and the fog. And then for the female, I was in a field, you know, long hair, just flowing, just looking across the field, just admiring, you know, the atmosphere and the environment, everything else that was in front of me. And for the child, I felt as though I was in, you know, the kite just sitting there looking up. And isn't it amazing how, and look, I don't know what it's like for you, Poe, TZ Created, but for me, every time I hear music, and what's been great and amazing is that Poe's introduced me to music, and apparently I have an ear for it, which I didn't realise I did. But it sends you on this amazing, I don't know, transforming spiritual journey where you can actually see anything and anything. You just got this visualization in your head, and I can't even explain it actually. To be fair, like it's.
I've had the pleasure of being in this fellow's presence on an Alan Duck's Books and Homes tour that him and myself and Josh went on, and that's where I learned how music actually transports you. And when I used to sit there, and because you usually used to open, I'll go in the middle and Josh would go last, and I used to sit there and get transfixed and transported into another world, and all these beautiful pictures of our mairanua, our past, and our tupuna, of them sitting on a waka or sitting on a rock in the middle of a lake, and just the way it reconnects you back to nature. And it reminds me of Maisie Rika's song too, Reconnecting. Another wonderful exponent of Māori music. And it's a privilege. It's a privilege to be around people like you, Kaz, who are doing our art forms amazing justice and revitalizing it and taking it to the world, man. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And when we talk about senses, and it's just clear right now, I'm literally using my senses to transform me into, you know, a state and have a vision literally just come across in front of my eyes. And where that vision has come from, I have no idea. Have I been there before? You know, probably in a past life. So, you know, we talk about senses a lot, and unfortunately a lot of people don't know how to use their senses, and it's all those unctions and those feelings that you get, but a lot of people don't act on them, and music absolutely brings that out and helps to actually bring it to the forefront, so then it can help guide you potentially, you know, into that journey or that experience or that moment of doing what's necessary. And it's absolutely
because one of the great things on that is, like, for a lot of people as well, you know, a lot of people, it's something as simple as, you know, going for a walk in the forest and just finding a good spot off the track and just sitting there and to listen. You know, no matter what geographic we are living in, whether we are living in the forests of New Zealand, whether we are living in the deserts of the Arabian continents, whether we are living in the urban concrete jungles of New York, you can always find a space where there's no one else around. And you just sit there and listen to the world around you, and you find the meaning behind. One day I heard this dude talk about the cacophony of silence. And I was just like, the what? You know? And then, and so I was like, doesn't cacophony mean like heaps and heaps and heaps of noise, or like a lot of calamity, or a lot of chaos or something? And then silence, and I didn't really get it until I went into the bush You know, I went into the bush like 5 o'clock in the morning before the sun came up, and just found a spot and just sat there. And you hear the morning wind, you know, subtle and nice and easy. And then all of a sudden there's a certain time of the morning where, as you're sitting there and not going to sleep, but as you're sitting there, you start hearing the twinkling of an actual stream that is not far from you. And then I heard this, you know, this rippling sound of water that I never heard like just half an hour ago. And then all of a sudden I'm hearing the branches actually come alive and the wind picking up. And then in amongst that sound of brushlings of the leaves and the branches, I hear this real simple, and then silence again, and then this wind again, and then once again it was like, you know, and then all of a sudden the third time round it was, and then, you know, it was like somebody sort of like waking everybody up. And then within 10 minutes the whole forest on this mountainside of a landscapey bush that I was sitting in just started playing this massive orchestration of natural sound. And I've done that in a few different landscapes, not just in the bush, but I've done it by the ocean as well, just sat there, you know, early as in the morning before the sun starts poking itself out over the mountaintops, along the horizon. And it's very similar, you know, and it's when you're able to hear that cacophony of silence in your own way, you actually see how intricate our nature and our natural environments are. And you know, that's some of the best healing one person can have, even if they don't know about their culture. But just being human, being in that space of being human and being alive, going to a space like that can open people's minds up to many wonders. And it is part of the healing journey.
So beautiful, Kaz. So
Yeah.
beautiful, man.
Wow.
Especially the way you do those manui, those waiata manui whaara. I forgot about that part of you.
Yeah.
Talking about that and being in that space, and also talking about senses, is actually using the environment, which, you know what, sitting here, we're from Te Kaha, from the East Coast, and we have a homestead there, and we would go there as kids every year on school holidays. And, you know, I haven't been back for years, but it's a very, you know, a massive reminder to me, all of the things that we did when we were kids. And literally that was it. We'd go into the bush up the back and we literally would sit there and listen. And those are the exact sounds that you would hear. And it just brings back all those childhood memories. And now being in the city, you know, being a little bit older, and then just being busy, life continues. You see things as a kid that actually makes you who you are. And unfortunately, as years go by, the influences come in that quickly shape you, potentially to somebody that maybe don't potentially want to be, but it's a case of having to be. And when I hear this sound, I go back to my childhood and I go, man, I need to take my kids back there, and I need to get them to connect back to nature and use that as a sense to guide them through their journey of life.
Yeah, I've been trying to take us back, Cuts.
Yeah, it is cool because before lockdown, the first lockdown in 2019, I managed to shoot over to New York, and I went there with a composer from here in Hamilton, and we created a piece of music called Ke Eke Panuku, and that really spoke about, you know, persevering through life's challenges. And because when you hear someone say Eke Panuku, Eke Tangaroa, you hear that a lot in oratory, you hear that a lot in different forms of formal speeches in Te Reo Māori, in the Māori language. And we did this performance, and we called it that. And when we played it, I played it, a lot of the, the different manu sounds, and then I played different flutes and sounds of nature. And I noticed this person, or a couple of these people, like hearty crying in the crowd. The crowd wasn't a humongous crowd in New York in this bar. It wasn't a massive bar. But after the performance, these people came up to us and said, I don't know what you did, but you took me home. I've never been there before. But and they started explaining the story when the piece started. They actually took us on this journey that they ended up on this bird, from New York, in New York, and they jumped on the back of this bird, flew, landed in this long grass on cliff sides next to the ocean, and they were walking towards the ocean, feeling the breeze. Like, they gave full descriptions, and as they were telling the story, they were like fully crying, and they were talking about about their journey and the story right through to the end, and said, and you took me there. That was the last thing I ever expected to find coming to this concert. I never thought anything would take me to a place like that, but you took me there. And this was a person that had been in New York most of his life, and had heard stories of his ancestral past, but had never gone back there. And so me and the bro were there going, Joe, that's me. That's awesome, bro. But he was, fully like, he's like, how did you do it? I want to go there again, because you took me home, but I'm still searching for that home, and it's like, it's the power and the wonders of what music, and the fusion of traditional and modern, because I was playing traditional music and doing vocals of both a traditional form of chanting, as well as spoken word poetry in that particular piece. And the mate that I was playing with was on a grand piano, as well as he had this small padded synth that he could use for different descriptive ambionic sounds, and so, but what we played, we actually put into an album that him and I done. And but it's cool that we were able to go all the way to New York and inspire somebody that was a complete stranger, that was able to share a full story of the journey that he took while he listened to it, because that was the first time we played it in front of an audience. And so it was really cool, and that's the power that the journey of healing can do, because not only on your own journey of healing and expressing your thanks of your healing journey to people, you actually don't really realize the impact that you can have on people that listen, people that see, people that look into, and people that come along for a ride. But you end up making a great impact on their lives in the most simplistic way, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, just chiming into your kōrero, because you and I are well aware of these things, and Jamie is to a certain degree, but she's becoming more and more aware and of how the profundity of music, especially music by people who are connected to their culture. Me, I'm still a pipi hei hei in terms of our Māori culture, and I'll always be a pipi hei hei in terms of our reo. But I mean, to have an exponent like you on the show, someone who's matatau in te kai kōrero, matatau in tikanga and kaua, and then obviously to express yourself through our taonga pūoro, with a master and expert like yourself. Yeah, but this is amazing. I'm trying to hold back my emotions, and especially when you do the bird calls, because talk about taking me back to my childhood, man.
It's interesting you were just talking about that, how you can influence in a positive sense, and help people to aspire and inspire. was just having a conversation with my staff, and we have set up, because a lot of our stores are based in Auckland, Hamilton and Northland, and we set up wellbeing calls. It's got nothing to do with work. It's not work. It's non-work related. It's just a space for our females to come to share, because we have a lot of staff that are isolated. So, we wanted to create a space, and, I was talking to them about, who we are, and that we have a lot of influence in our roles within our jobs to influence and encourage and motivate and support and mentor, young women coming through that don't take that for granted, because they are going to look to you as that leader, as that tohunga, like yourself, in that space. So, you need to be very aware of that and know that you are going to shape and influence them in a certain way. And, we've been talking a lot about gifts and talents, and you clearly have an amazing talent that if I could do that, man, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I'd be out in the bush doing my thing and trying to give what I can to everybody and share. We've had males, females reach out, wanting to find their purpose and their talent and their gift. What advice can you give them in terms of that?
Well, for me, one of the biggest things is finding what is it that one enjoys. What is the one thing that people do that, no matter what anybody else does, no matter what anybody else says, what is their sort of like thing that they love to do that makes them feel who they are and makes them feel at one with themselves. For me, it's always sort of like, for a long time now, it's been music. And no matter what type of music, you have many people that like only specific types of music. You have your metalers, you have your hip hop, you have your reggaes, you have your. I'm one of those that I love all forms of music, and I've had the privilege to play our traditional instruments, where a lot of people once thought that, you only play them on a marae, or you only play them in traditional places. And it's like, well, do you only talk on the marae?
Yeah.
Or do you talk everywhere you go?
Yeah.
Do you only wear a pew when you're performing? Or do you only, and it's challenging everyone just to allow them to recognize what's the one thing that they're good at. And if they know they're good at, and they don't care what other people think, but they know they love doing that particular thing, my advice will be to, when I started my journey, I had to realize that, I had to stop thinking what everybody else thought and just do it. And as you're on that journey, it's the old sayings, if you want to be creative, hang out with creative people.
Right.
If you want to be bright, go and hang out with bright people. If you want to be, if you want to be somebody, go hang out with people that are loving what they're doing. And so, and when you do meet them, and when you go away from them, it doesn't mean you're not with them anymore. It just means you've got time to reflect on those times you were with those people, and sort of like help build yourself. So by the next time you meet those people, you've got something to add to the conversation. Because whenever I go back up home to the north and I see some of the cousins, or go back to the coast and see some of the cousins, and it's the old saying, you go, "Oh, cuz, what you been up to?" And you hear them saying, "Oh, cuz, same old, same old." And I'm like, bro, it's been years. What's the same old?
Yeah.
And it's like, "Oh, what about you, cuz?" And then when I say, "Oh, bro, I've been doing this. I did this album. I went on this concert tour. I went on to that." They're like, "Oh, got a big head, far out, just because we're not doing it." Like, cuz, it's not that you're not doing anything. You need to be active. Stop just sitting at home playing your PlayStation.
Yeah.
Get off your butt. Do something, and then maybe you've got something to talk about. Unless, so if you are playing PlayStation, are you a part of an international crew? Are you getting paid for the hours that you're on that game for? Because did you know, cuz, you can get paid for being a gamer?
Yeah.
You know, oh, true, cuz, you know? And it's like, bro, be onto it, you know? And it's sort of like, because in you doing what you're doing, like the three of us here, you know, no doubt we've got family that sort of like look at each of us and see, oh, far out, man, it's really awesome seeing, you know, oh, what's the cousin's AKA name? Oh, it's, you know, it's, oh, what's Horo been up to? Oh, what's the sis been up to? You know, and then when they check you out on TikTok, check you out on Facebook, check you out on Instagram, and say, "Fuck, they've been doing heaps."
Yeah.
Oh man, I need to get my own ass into gear, so when I catch up with the pro, I can do something with them.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, and it's keeping them, we keep others motivated to continue if we continue doing the trek that we are in. And so, you know, and that's why, you know, I think the last time I seen the bro, he was nominated for a Waiata Māori Music Award, you know, and before then, you know, we were doing tours around New Zealand, and so, you know, the next time I've caught up with the brother here, you know, it's cool being able to, even though the years go by, that we're still searching and still in that same area of, you know, continuing the learning, and finding out characteristics of ourselves, that we love to express, you know, and we're using different platforms and doing that, you know, and so, you know, it's really awesome to continue to get that affirmation, you know, that affirmation that, you know, the journey we're on is the right journey. And as like for you, sis, with your language journey, and to you too, my bro, you know, I always tell people, you know, all it takes is one word at a time.
Correct.
You know, all it takes is one word at a time. And sis, hearing you say you're from Te Kaha, you know, all it takes, when I first started learning, you know, what I would do was I would find name places, you know, like the word Te Kaha, you know, and I would find out what Te Kaha meant, and see if the word that I found in the description of what Te Kaha means, how close is that to the story of how Te Kaha got its name.
Yes.
And so not only do you learn the word, but you learn a story that comes with it,
Yes.
you know. And so that's how I learned. And it wasn't until I learned all these words and my own stories and the actual stories, where when I was able to open up my mouth in my first tests to myself, speaking to other people thought I was from Kura Kaupapa Māori. You know, they thought I was always speaking Māori my whole life, and I'm like, oh no, I came from the streets there, cuz. You know, and
Yes.
you know, so everybody moves on their journey of learning a language in their own way, and there's not one correct way. It's, we are all unique, and like your journey on this awesome kaupapa of the healing well, and your aroha tāne, you know, is, you know, a perfect way to encapsulate our language, because aroha meaning the love, you know, and tāne meaning that masculinity, meaning for our men, but not only our men, because our wahine, you know, hold that masculinity as well. And it's understanding that part of the journey. So I just really want to give you both a big ups for this kaupapa, and I really hope a lot of people tune into your kaupapa, because, you know, it's you know, it's awesome being able to have these opportunities to share the experiences and learn from one another, and grow, because that's part of the healing well.
Kazi, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I knew you would, because I know what you're like, and I know your kaupapa driven, rhymes uplifted, you know, and us being Māori, and especially whanaunga, and with our whakapapa, Ngāti Porou, Rongoa mai hua tahi tū, you know, and those connection to Te Arawa, And the fact that you used to live at Koutu Point there, and just all those connections, those Ngā Te Koro connections, Te Whānau Apanu connections, Mai Tai connections, and then Te Arawa, and then now we're here in Tainui, and then me being off the Tainui waka from Tōrerenga, from Mai Tai, and then us being here, like you said before, there's no coincidence. We're here for a purpose, and I'm going to carry that purpose on, and I'm going to be sending you a couple of beats soon, so we can do some mahi are here together. So yeah, awesome, guys. Thank you.
Cool.
Reading my mouth, Tizi Creator, because she cut me off. I was just about to say the same thing, but in saying that, literally took the words out of my mouth, and I'm actually going to end it there because it's been tino atua. It's been a beautiful session, and I've learned actually a lot from the show, literally from yourself, and how I can reconnect back to my roots and actually continue that on with my two gorgeous tamariki. So thank you, privileged, absolutely, and we'll see you soon.
Cool. And just in signing off, I'll just play this little waiata. This is like the instrument I spoke of earlier, the kōwauau. So this is a kōwauau made from one of our native rākau, and just in closing, sharing the kaupapa of Rongoa, of healing, sharing the kaupapa of aroha tāne, through our tāne and through our wahine. Just want to express my thanks and gratitude for inviting me onto your show. So just a short little waiata, but nei rā taku mihi aroha kia kōrua tahi, e te tuahine Jamie, nei rā tō tūnane e mihi kauatu ana ki a koe, e te prata, te kahi no te tairāwhiti, mai make tū ki Tongariro, mai ngā kuri a whare ki tihi rau, nei rā te mihi aroha o te maunga hukurangi, te awa o waiapu atu kia tātou, tēnā koutou. Mauri ora.
Here's to my eyes.
Here's to my eyes. Dribble to my eyes.
Kia ora. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Ngā mihi aroha.